everybody, and welcome back to a brand new edition of KerVAM, a Doctor Who podcast where we discuss Doctor Who, but really we focus on the DVDs, the Blu-rays, the special features, everything surrounding the physical releases of Doctor Who. And today we have the very exciting opportunity to discuss the Season 2 Blu-ray box set that was released a week or two ago, full of new special features and packed with content that we're certainly going to be delving into and discussing, as well as the latest on RTD2 after the costume reveal over the weekend and a few things that Russell T Davies has been saying in recent weeks. I am, of course, joined by, two of my three intrepid guests. It is Orion and Charlie. Charlie, how are you getting on today?
Very good, thanks. I've been, I'm on Christmas holidays now, so I've had lots of time to watch through the special features. Not necessarily all of the behind the sofas, but I have all the stories I've rewatched.
Okay.
So yeah, looking forward to discussing all of that, and of course the news about, we've just had the costume reveal for Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. That was very exciting, among the other rumours that we've had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's lots going on. I feel like there's just a lot going on in the world of Doctor Who, even though there's nothing going on, and we probably haven't got another episode until November next year. It just feels like there's always something new with Doctor Who at the moment. There's always something to talk about. I don't know, Ryan, are you feeling the same kind of feelings about the future of Doctor Who at the moment?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, some exciting stuff happening in the past month, some big announcements, and yeah, it seems like it's all gearing up towards the 60th anniversary next year. So hopefully we get some more new stuff each year as we get closer and closer.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, Bill couldn't make it today as he's not feeling very well, but hopefully he'll be adding a little contribution in later. Hopefully I'll be able to include that later in the podcast. But of course, first I wanted to start by discussing the news around RTD2, everything that's happening in the next kind of 2 years, I suppose. We obviously have got the 60th anniversary specials next year with David Tennant as the Doctor, those 3 specials. We've got a festive special next year with Ncuti Gatwa, his first episode. So we will get 4 episodes of Doctor Who next year, which isn't great, I guess, when you compare it to previous years when it's the anniversary, but it's better than nothing. And about the fact that Russell's back and David Tennant's back, I feel like is good news. We also know that Series 14 is going to be an 8-episode series, which started filming like in the last week or two, I think 2 weeks ago, something like that. I think they started filming it, and then they've done the first location filming shoots over this weekend because, of course, we had the costume reveal, which is also tremendously exciting. So, Charlie, 8 episodes in Series 14. Does that feel like a positive or a negative to you?
It's difficult for me because I kind of think this is how TV is made now. Like with all the stuff on, Disney Plus, like all the new Marvel shows and Star Wars shows, typically 6 episodes is the norm. So it's kind of better than average, I guess. But at the same time, I obviously it's the lowest amount of episodes for a season of Doctor Who besides Flux, I guess. And even then, we sort of had the 2022 specials to accompany that. So really, it was 9 episodes. So it's kind of the lowest amount of episodes we've had. And in a way, it's a good thing because, Russell T Davies, I think his era and to a lesser extent Moffat's era had a lot of filler episodes because obviously for the first 7 seasons we had 13 episodes, and then we had 3 seasons of 12 episodes each. We did find that we had a couple of random episodes that just weren't great and didn't really need to be there and didn't really contribute to the season. So I think it's good if we're sort of eliminating, cutting down on those and just having the absolute best. But at the same time, I can't help but think it just feels like less. And I don't know, like what's next? We might have 2 8-episode seasons, then some 6 episodes, and I just feel like I'm all for quality over quantity, but not to such an extreme that it becomes like it's over as soon as it started.
Exactly.
I think I'm still happy that we're getting hopefully Christmas specials, regular Christmas specials, because obviously I really miss them from. I mean, the first Doctor Who episode I watched on first broadcast was Twice Upon a Time. Obviously, that being the last Christmas special, not that I was aware of that at the time. Because I remember finishing because I got into Doctor Who properly in 2017, and I just watched through all of New Who in the autumn, and I remember finishing The Doctor Falls on Christmas Eve or something.
Wow!
Just in time for Twice Upon a Time. It was great. So very good memories of Christmas specials. So it'd be great to see. It'd be great to see them come back regularly.
Exactly.
But yeah, fundamentally, 8-episode seasons. It's a double-edged sword, really. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's, it does kind of feel like we're just forever losing episodes with every new series. I know this is up on Flux, but Flux was a unique scenario, I think, whereas we've gone 13, then 12, then 10, now 8. It sort of does feel like it's going that way. I mean, given what Russell was saying in DWM about, the way he worded some of the stuff he said almost sounded like either they're starting off with 8 and then they're going to go bigger and add more episodes. Like he was saying, I know it's only 8 episodes, but it's going to, we're going to keep growing. It kind of was sort of the words of what he said. Or whether there's going to be some spin-offs to kind of compensate for less actual Doctor Who, but more spin-off and therefore Doctor Who content throughout the year, I guess could be a thing. And yeah, obviously with the festive special, that kind of makes it a 9-episode series, I guess, which is the same as Flux. So it's, yeah, I mean, I hope that the festive specials are actually Christmas, because he was kind of like, well, this is just how I refer to a generic end of year special. And I'm like, but it's got to be Christmas. Come on. Like, I've been watching, I've seen every Doctor Who Christmas special at Christmas. Well, I guess except Feast of Stephen. I'm not that old. But outside of that one, I've seen them all. And so it would be really, really wonderful to enjoy Doctor Who on Christmas Day again. I feel like it's just right. It's just how it should be. I don't know, Ryan, where do you feel about all this, Christmas specials, episode counts, spin-offs? Where are you sitting with all the news at the moment?
Exactly the same thoughts as Charlie, really. It is really a double-edged sword because, I mean, yes, I am one for getting rid of filler episodes because, to be fair, a lot of Doctor Who seasons do have, filler episodes. I mean, as much as, even though I've said many times that Capaldi is my joint favourite Doctor of all time, even his 3 seasons had some fillers episodes, whether it's In the Forest of the Night, Sleep No More, Eaters of Light, which weren't very good, let's be honest. I'm all for quality over quantity, but at the same time, could we be sacrificing potentially more great stories that could have been told within the season?
Yeah.
Because who knows if maybe the stories they come up with, maybe some of them weren't filler at all. They're actually really good quality standalone ones in the same vein as something like Oxygen or something like that. And are those going to be cut down because they couldn't fit any more episodes in? It's a shame. I mean, we don't know really what the planning was, but I'm hoping it works out for the best. I mean, I don't want it to be a case of diminishing smaller seasons each year. I really didn't want that to happen because I was a bit worried about that with Jodie Whittaker's season where it was starting to go down with each episode, but and this seems to be going an extra step further, so hopefully it all turns out fine. I'm hoping it's all for the sake of quality over quantity, but we shall wait and see.
I think it's interesting that you both mentioned about that idea of dropping out filler episodes from the series, because I remember many people saying exactly the same things when we heard that Jodie Whittaker was going down to 10 episodes from 12. They were like, oh, it's going to be great because, those two filler episodes in each series, they'll be gone and we'll just get a consistent series of brilliance. And I feel like we're just doing exactly the same thing again. I mean, I have much more optimism because it's RTD. But it just feels like we're having exactly the same conversations we did 5 years ago, which I just think is quite funny. That Doctor Who just keeps circling around in our sort of fandom opinions.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jodie Whittaker's first season, even the finale, which one of my most hated episode of Modern Doctor Who, Battle of Ranskow, of course. Even that was a filler episode. To an extent, you could have taken that out of that season, and it wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever. Nothing would have been changed.
Yep, literally. And that was there's many problems with Series 11, but that is also one of the fundamental ones, is that every episode feels like filler. And we get stuck in that rather difficult place. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes over the next few years, whether we see the episode count then grow in the future, or whether it's spin-offs or whatever. I think it's going to be quite interesting. We obviously saw the costume reveal yesterday from when we were recording this for Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. Ryan, what did you think of Ncuti's new costume?
Well, and I thought Matt Smith loved tweed. Holy cow! Gatwa's costume, all about tweed. In a way, it's kind of almost a bit back to Eccleston a little bit, who had like a basic look. In a way, Ncuti Gatwa sort of has a basic look, but I feel like even though it may shape-wise it looks basic, there's still a lot of personality to it, you know, with the whole tweed jacket and tweed trousers, the brown boots, the orange shirt, and of course the rings and the tattoos.
Yeah, the little nail art, yeah.
Yeah, which I feel like is a interesting thing to kind of put on the dot. I mean, of course, with Capaldi, you had like the ring, and now we're having like nail tattoos, so Gallifreyan. So it does look quite good, and I think it's definitely, in a way, it's sort of a bit Capaldi-esque, where it's a bit simple, basic, but yet it has a lot of personality to it at the same time. And so I don't know if I would say it's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I don't know if it's up there with like the likes of Tom Baker's outfit, especially that original outfit they had, or even Capaldi's, but it is definitely a good, strong outfit nonetheless. I mean, in a way, and also, I mean, David Tennant's new outfit is also really good as well, because it kind of shape-wise, it looks like his original outfit, but yet it's different as well, which is I really like. So I think he's done a good job of with the two new outfits he's got for both 14 and 15. I feel like he's definitely got the look right, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really like it personally. I think it feels very doctory. I think, you know, the classic sort of long coat look to it, but also quite sort of slick. So it feels, you know, he's not a sort of, I don't know, rugged doctor. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know, it's a very sort of slick and smooth outfit. And I mean, the orange just adds a bit of color and personality to it as well, which I think is great. Yeah, I mean, I thought, because they released two photos, didn't they? The sort of posing photo, and then there was the sort of shot of them on the trailer, sort of, you know, on the location of filming. It just completely reminded me of that picture of Matt Smith and Karen Gillan on filming of Flesh and Stone, I think it was, where the first episode they did, where they, you know, they had the costume reveal of them sat in the trailer. It just gave me full vibes, you know, especially with Shooty having a slightly similar costume, sort of, you know, with the tweed to what Matt Smith had. I sort of really just felt those two words. I don't know. So, Charlie, what did you think of the new costume? Do you think it hopefully fits the new Doctor?
I think it's really difficult to say without seeing it like in episodes. It we've just sort of seen this costume in isolation, and that's all we're given, really. It's not my favorite Doctor outfit. If I was to rank all of them, it would probably go a bit lower down. Like, I don't hate it. And it's, when I first saw it, I was very disappointed. I was like, this isn't very good. It just seemed very samey, and I wasn't too fan of the orange, and it just it looked a bit like a what's it to reference another of his things. It's sort of grown on me now. I kind of appreciate the attention to detail, what we're saying with the rings and the nail, you know. I'm sure he'll pull it off. Shooting out, well, you know, he will. But yeah, it's not amazing. I think out of the three RTD2 costumes that we've seen, that being 14, 15, and Ruby Sunday, we saw hers. Or one of hers, you know.
I think it's always the thing is she'll probably just wear different outfits every episode, so it feels like a bit, you know, it's not much to say. It's just casual, you know, standard kind of clothes you wear.
Yeah, but I think the 14th Doctor's outfit does look better. I don't hate it. I like it, but it's not quite on the same level as I don't know, you know, 3, 4, 12, even 13. You know, it's not quite up there, but I'm still happy we have a look for this Doctor, you know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see it in action. I think that's always the sort of, you know, real tell of it. Because I remember really liking Jodie's when I first saw that classic picture of her on that sort of grassy background. But then I don't feel like I loved her costume during the era. It was all right, but I also think it's that thing of whether they change costume at all through the year as well, because Jodie basically didn't change her costume apart from inverting it in Once Upon a Time. That was literally it. Whereas like Capaldi went through about 5 different costumes. I mean, the Heaven Sent sort of end of series 9 is the ultimate costume for me. The red velvet jacket is just absolutely peak. But sorry, Ryan, go for it.
Yeah, it's so funny, interesting with them. Jodie's costume. In a way, I was intrigued by it first, but then someone brought up a line which has stuck with me ever since, and probably why I never completely loved Jodie. They described as looking like Cloud's assistant's first day at the circus, and that stuck with me ever since, because it does look a bit almost clownish in a way, not nowhere near to the extent that Colin Baker's
Yes.
was. I mean,
Yeah.
the less said about that, the better. But in a way, that's kind of why I actually kind of prefer Shooties over Jodie's, because yes, it's much more simpler than Jodie's, but I feel like it doesn't feel as almost clown devolves. It feels more like a clothing as opposed to something like a costume.
Absolutely. That's the key
I
thing.
feel like Jodie's felt almost a bit costume-ish to an extent. I mean, but then again, we saw this happen in the 80s to a certain extent since Tom Baker's last outfit, which was just all completely red. You couldn't really tell much apart. So I'm glad that they not gone too much in that route with Shooty. So at least we have that.
Well, exactly, and it'll be exciting to see him in action. I mean, I wonder whether he will. I guess we will see his costume in his first episode. Probably won't be till the end, will it? But then we know that Shooty appears in some form in the 60th anniversary specials as well. So I'm really intrigued to see how that's all going to play out, because you would kind of naturally assume that David Tennant's going to regenerate at the end of the 3 specials into Shooty. But then we know Shooty is in it at some point. I mean, also interesting thing that we saw in DWM was that shot of Shooty is a replaced background. That's not the real background from the episode, because apparently it was too spoilery. I thought that was... I loved that like Russell's going to the point of like changing trade just for a trailer, changing backgrounds and things. I just think that's really cool. And so it's got to be... Maybe it's the new TARDIS. I don't know. I mean, there's a leak of that. We won't talk about it, but there was a leak of the new TARDIS. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is, or I don't know. I'm just really intrigued as to how exactly that's all going to work out. Like, will Shooty kind of be established by the end of the 60th? So, like, he's already in his new costume going into the festive special next year, and it just kind of is in first adventure, or is that going to be... I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the Christmas special for next year is going to be the last of this 60th anniversary. I don't think it'll be a trilogy. I think it'll be like a quadrilogy that's starting from the...
Okay.
This is only my bet, as it's going to start from the 23rd and it'll finish on November and finish on the 25th of December, this sort of 4-episode quadrilogy. And I think David Tennant will be the Doctor for about 75% of it. And I think it'll be towards the end of the 3rd episode, near the end of the 3rd episode, where Shooty will be established as the Doctor, and the last third of the 60th anniversary will be basically his first adventure. So it'll be turned into the middle of the action, basically. So it's going to be interesting how they're going to do that. I mean, of course, the 14th Doctor's going to join the ranks of Paul McGann as the shortest lived.
I know. He's got a maximum screen time of 3 hours, really, hasn't he? So
yeah, basically. And then all of a sudden, Shooty's just thrown into the middle of the action. No, like, slow burn sort of thing. He's just done straight into it. So it's going to be interesting how they're going to do both. It's basically both the 14th Doctor's first story as well as a regeneration story and the 15th Doctor at the same time. So it's
it really is. Yeah,
balance it all out.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm intrigued to see even just like how interconnected the 60th anniversary specials episodes are. Like, are they kind of 3 individual stories? Are they going to be a full arc with a to be continued at the end of each one? Or like, I don't know. Charlie, what do you think? How do you think all these like 3/4 episodes are going to play out next year?
It depends, because there's 2 things here. There's what I want to happen and what I think will happen.
Yes.
I'm not saying what I think will happen will be bad, but like, in a perfect world, it would be an anthology. It would be, I'd have a special with McGann, and maybe Eccleston. Well, in a perfect world, Eccleston, and then I'd have another with David Tennant, and then I'd have another with like Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, maybe have Tennant in as well, and then just have Shooty like for the oh no, that wouldn't work, would it? And then have like the 14th Doctor for the Christmas special next year, who then regenerates into Shooty at the end. That would be my perfect scenario.
Yeah,
but that's not going to happen. I feel it's going to be, we've got David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa.
I don't think we're going to see any other
like
Doctors,
an arc. And then at the end, then I'm not sure how it's going to work regeneration wise, because like if both of them are already in it, then how is it going to work? Is he just going to regenerate into Ncuti and the other Ncuti will go away and it's a future version? Or we don't really know the plot of this thing, but like, I definitely feel like David Tennant's 14th Doctor won't be in the Christmas special, and it's just going to be Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday, and it's just going to lead into series 14.
Yeah, so maybe like the Christmas special will kind of be the companion introduction story almost. And the end of the 60th will be Shooty's introduction. And then it's his first proper episode, but it's also introducing the new companion at Christmas. And then set them off for Series 14, which, maybe they'll go straight into Series 14 and air it from like January 2024, maybe. I think that'd be quite cool. Kind of start the series with a Christmas special, then like 2 weeks later you start the series properly. I think that'd be great. But well, it's exciting that we've got this to talk about and that we got it to theorise, and as promotion starts next year and all of that, as much as there is no Doctor Who on right now, there is still many exciting things to talk about, and I think it's only going to increase through the next 12 months. But of course, we are today teleporting. This is Doctor Who. We don't teleport in Doctor Who. We go in the TARDIS and go back 58 years to 1964 and Doctor Who Season 2, or as Peter Purvis recording the descriptions on the Blu-rays, Doctor Who Series 2 for some reason. I'm not quite sure why they couldn't get that right. Ryan, like, come on, it's pretty basic, isn't it? Like when someone sat there and saying, can you record, the name of the series, so we're going to put it on the disc, surely they'd say season, like we've done for the last 12 box sets. I was just like,
it's a bit weird. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll just put in a patch and say, "Oh, we'll send out the correct disc with the correct."
They'd have to send us all of them, though, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I know. It'll be like those games where they announce a patch for each one, and maybe they could try and patch it with a new disc. Who knows?
That would be hilarious. Anyway, it's a small thing, so not to be confused with the 2006 series of Doctor Who. This is of Season 2, with, the return of William Hartnell as the Doctor, saying goodbye to Susan, the introduction of Vicky as well. Gosh, it's been a while since I watched these episodes. And of course, we've got a brand new big Blu-ray box set for it this year, in the last couple of weeks. We've only, of course, had 2 collection box sets this year, Season 22 and Season 2. So it's been a fairly quiet year on the front, but hopefully we'll get 3 for next year. But of course, as always, the Blu-ray collections get loads of extra documentaries and special features, and we're going to cover all those in this podcast, which is very exciting. But firstly, Ryan, do you have any general opinions on Season 2? I know there's like 9 stories in it, so it's quite a big thing to kind of give an opinion on. But kind of the overall kind of feel of the whole season and that era of the show, kind of where do you sit with it all?
Well, I do have an affinity for the first 4 Doctors. I mean, William Hartnell was my 4th favourite Doctor, and so it was very good going back to revisit Season 2, which I think is almost or just about as good as the first season. I think it's a really good, solid season of the show. I mean, yes, there may be 2, maybe 3 stories that don't quite work. There being the Web Planet, the Space Museum, and the Chase. Even though I do like the end of the Chase, everything was just very, all over the place, and that is a huge understatement. And the Web Planet, I mean, I admire the Web Planet's ambition, and I can understand why Peter Capaldi loves it so much, but, man, was it a bit rough. I'm not going to lie, but I do think it is a good, strong, solid season. Of course, this is the season that has my favourite William Hartnell story to date, which is Dalek Invasion of Earth, which is just an absolute masterpiece and is probably up there in my top 5 favourite Dalek stories of all time. I think it's a really good, strong, solid story, and in a very good, strong season full of really just some top quality Doctor Who, which were they able to do. I think, and they said in one of the documentaries that they pretty much filmed this almost back to back with season 1, with virtually very little breaks. So it's a miracle with that. Well, to be honest, with that crunch, that time scale, that they were able to produce mostly good, top quality stuff. So yeah, it was definitely a good season to go back and revisit.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there is a lot of good stuff in there. I think it's always interesting to think about whether, because obviously we say Dalek Invasion of Earth is one of the best Hartnell stories, but like if the whole of Dalek Master Plan existed, do we think that Dalek Master Plan would be considered the all-time classic of the Hartnell era? Yeah. I feel like it probably would be. And like if we were missing 4 episodes of Dalek Invasion of Earth, but we had all 12 of Master Plan, then 100% I think Master Plan would be the golden moment of Hartnell era. I don't
know. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Dalek's Master Plan. I love it to bits. I don't know if I would replace it. I think it might be just as good as Dalek Invasion of Earth for me. That's not to diminish Dalek Master Plan. I mean, it is such a great story. And I'm so upset that we never got an animation of it because I so want an animation of that story so badly.
Sad. Yeah, maybe one day, but unfortunately, it's not going to be next year. That's for sure. We'd know about it by now if it was going to be next year. That's a bit sad. But Charlie, season 2, obviously full of ideas and imagination. Some of it, as we say, doesn't really work like the Web Planet, but some of it really does. What's your overall thoughts on season 2, the episodes?
It's a pretty great season, really. I mean, it doesn't sound too great when I say it's my 5th favorite 60s season. Just above season 3, but like, well, no, it's actually quite a bit above season 3. But like, I love the Troughton era so much that that's all above it. And season 1 is my 3rd favorite Doctor Who season of all time. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Even the Censorites.
Even this with the Censorites, it would probably be 2nd or even 1st without the Censorites. I adore it. It's fantastic. Season 6 is my favorite of 60, so it's probably 2nd place. It's I might be a bit more biased since I've been watching so much 60 stuff recently. I'm not too sure, but
that's good.
I do love season 2. It's fantastic. What you were saying about the chase, yeah, it's very all over the place. I do love it. Like, it's not quite on the same level as the Dalek invasion of Earth, Daleks Master Plan, or even the Daleks, but it's still a bit of fun. Like, you know, I kind of like it. Space Museum, I don't mind too bad, but Web Planet, no. But things like the Crusade, you know, that's okay. But I think it's really elevated by things like Dalek invasion of Earth, Planet of Giants, Time Med, those sort of stories. They're really good. They don't save it because it would be fine enough, I think, without them, but definitely I think the highs are just as high as season 1, but the lows I think are a bit lower.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. There is a couple of proper sort of duds in season 2, which isn't really, the Censorites isn't great. I don't think Reign of Terror is that great, but as a whole season, it's pretty consistently good. Compared to this, where it's up and down, I think it's fair to say. But of course, we're also here to talk mainly about the documentaries and special features of this release. Now, this release, I think it's notable that in general, there's probably less special feature content on each disc compared to, say, if you're watching a McCoy season or something, where there's about, 20 interviews with the cast from the time that when they've been on different BBC and ITV programs or whatever, and loads and 5-6 hours of behind the scenes footage and all this kind of stuff that there just obviously isn't the content available there for season 2, and so, or for these early 60 seasons. And so obviously we see, there's no behind the sofa on a couple of stories. I think Planet of Giants, The Crusade, and I can't remember what the other one is, but something like that. Can you remember what the other one was that didn't have it, Ryan, apart from The Crusade?
I think it was the Space Museum.
Yes, that was it. Yes, Planet of Giants, Crusade, and the Space Museum. I mean, I can understand the Crusade because it was a recon, and so I don't think even the Doctor Who Blu-ray team would put Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton through some recons. I think that would be a little bit too much even for them.
It's a shame the Crusade never got animated, because I really enjoyed the Crusade. I mean, I'm a sucker for the pseudo historicals, and I actually really like the Reign of Terror. I mean, yes, the animations on it were not good. I think we've gone on record saying that they're probably among the worst of the animations, but I do really like the Reign of Terror. I mean, as I said, I did really enjoy the historicals back in the 60s, and it's a shame they never quite touched up on this again. But I guarantee, I think the Crusade, I think it would be more highly remembered if all of it existed or half of it was animated. But it's a shame. But I would say that I am really surprised that they have given it a full disc to itself, considering that half of it is missing. I think it's a testament that they decided, no, it's going to get its own disc, which I do appreciate. And I know we might be jumping a little bit ahead here, but rewatching it looks much better than it did on DVD.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's so much better. The audio's better. The picture quality is better. It doesn't look as crackly as it did with the DVD. So I'm really glad they've actually gone and touched upon the episodes that really needed a lot of care and attention. I'm hoping they do the same for the rest of the 60s and most of John Pertwee's first season, because I know with John's first season, a lot of that did look pretty rough looking, even on a DVD.
Yeah, I think I'm generally really impressed with the improvements across the board on season 2. The restoration, I think, is fantastic. As you say, the Crusade episodes in particular are a massive improvement. I mean, I think with season 7, that's going to be tricky because a lot of the problems are the lack of color footage and trying to basically turn black and white into color. I mean, like the Silurians is pretty patchy, and bits of Ambassadors of Death is also pretty bad. So I don't know, because of the lack of color, that might be more difficult than just like tidying up black and white sort of takes like we've got for this season. But the restoration team do an amazing job, and I'll be intrigued to see what happens when we get to that point. Cool, so we've chatted a little bit about season 2, but of course we're here to talk about the special features, the new stuff. So as I say, there's not loads of new stuff on every disc because there's 9 discs and they can't produce like 20 new documentaries or something, but there is some good new content in there. The first which I want to talk about, I feel like is probably the kind of headline biggest feature on here, well I think it is the Looking for David documentary, which is of course all about Doctor Who's first script editor, David Whittaker, a guy who I almost didn't realise that we knew nothing about him, to be honest. I knew this documentary was coming, but I didn't realise how little we actually knew about him as a person. The fact he died quite young, and just never been interviewed or anything like that. And so I thought it was absolutely fascinating to just learn all this information about his life. I think probably a quite tragic story. I think he didn't really often arcs in documentaries are about having a sort of low points and high points and whatever, and it feels like his life really ended on a low point ultimately. He sort of had his big high point of working on Doctor Who and producing different stuff, and then it all just kind of went downhill from there. But Charlie, what was your take on this documentary? Of course, another Chris Chapman documentary. We've seen lots of this style before, the Looking for Lenny documentary a few years ago, among others. What did you think of this one?
I was really looking forward to this documentary, not because it's like something like I'm particularly interested in, like from a content-based level, I was more excited for Doctor Who and the Collector's Flight Through Eternity, and like in previous box sets, we've had stuff like the Douglas Adams documentary, which I was really looking forward to. I was a big fan of his, but this I was looking forward to mostly because of Chris Chapman, and obviously he's like the god of Doctor Who documentaries. He's really good. So I was looking forward to this purely because he makes good documentaries, and I feel this one was really quite emotional in the sense that he played such an important role in the early days of Doctor Who, and after that then he didn't really have much else. We've got Verity Lambert and Sidney Newman. Their names are in the history books among people like Terry Nation, the founding people of Doctor Who, really. And David Whittaker, we haven't really heard anything about, and I think it's just really fascinating and sad as well to just learn about his life when, sure, it's interesting, but it was 60 years ago, So yeah, it was quite fascinating in that sense. But it was really great.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a really insightful documentary that provided me loads of stuff I didn't know about him as a person. I don't know, Ryan, what did you think of this documentary?
Easily the best documentary of season 2 for me. It gave me more insight into David Whittaker than I never expected before. I mean, obviously I knew who David Whittaker was. I knew he was like the first script editor of Doctor Who, that he wrote Power the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks, both of which I think are amazing. So yeah, it really shocked me how very bittersweet this and tragic the whole story is. The fact that he eventually got cancelled by the people that employed him, and it's just one roller coaster and after another. It was really, really touched me in a lot of ways, because I mean, obviously none of this was known. I mean, I had no idea about this, so just hearing all about him meeting his wife, and then ultimately what eventually happened that caused him getting almost blacklisted from the BBC, and which led to kind of the fantasies of gambling, which then eventually led to his divorce. It was just it actually really got to me in a lot of ways. So, and I feel like they did such a great job, and Toby Haydock, of course, is such a great host anyways, and I feel like he did a really good job of providing more insight to a man that, frankly, should have got just as much respect as Barrett Lambert and Sidney Newman, frankly.
Yeah, exactly, for the way he pulled those early series of Doctor Who together. As you say, wrote incredible stories like Power of the Daleks, Evil of the Daleks, among others. Like, he was so instrumental in that early period of Doctor Who. And yeah, you know, whenever we talk about the founding people of Doctor Who, as you say, it's Verity Lambert, Sidney Newman. Maybe you get Maurice Hussein because he directed the first one, Terry Nation, obviously. But I mean, it was fascinating to hear that whole thing about Terry Nation and David Whittaker having a massive falling out. I thought that was really, really interesting. And, you know, I mean, I guess it's one of those things where you're never sure how, I don't want to say how true and accurate that is, but like, it's like a guy who was 10 at the time giving his sort of memories and recollections of one moment. And so, you know, I guess you have to take that with a little pinch of salt because it's just such a long time ago. But it's still interesting to see that sort of the tensions that were created there between two people who seemed to work really well together initially. And then, as you say, the sort of, you know, breakdown of his marriage and the way that all those things played out, it just felt like a catalogue of sad events, really. His moving to Australia that he hoped was going to be sort of, you know, a big break as well, a big opportunity that just didn't happen. All that stuff around Russia as well was really, you know, intriguing. And I just, you know, it's so sort of, you know, crazy to see that, you know, Doctor Who script editors are sort of getting involved in stuff like that. And as you say, then getting cancelled and things, I just thought was, you know, really just, yeah, it felt like such a life that just didn't fulfill its potential and then just got forgotten about, really, I think.
Yeah, in a way, one quote that did stick with me was that when he began working in Australia after the whole falling out, he then written this letter saying about how, in a way, working in Australia is like a mirage, fantasizing to look at, but the more you delve deeper, the more sort of unhappy or unfulfilling it can be. So, which really stuck with me. And that letter at the end, where it seemed like this fan letter, it seemed like it was written to, but it wasn't. It was done by his widow because by then he had unfortunately passed away to cancer. It was. I think that really definitely got me most of all.
Yeah, and it's crazy that we still have that as well. Like, from 40 years ago, this letter's been saved, the sort of, you know, the final things that David Whittaker ever wrote. And, you know, we were able to see a copy of that. And I mean, I think that's what is amazing about documentaries like this is that you know, and Chris Chapman is so great at that, along with Toby Hadoke, that they can uncover these kind of things about these people. And so somebody that you thought, like, you know, there is nothing out there to be able to be found about them, but actually there is so much. And I think that just, really enhanced a documentary like this. Charlie, did you share that kind of, you know, that feeling of just, it was quite a life of missed opportunities and a life that just didn't really play out as he would have hoped, I guess.
Yeah, it was probably one of the most emotional documentaries of the whole collection range, definitely. I mean, up there with the Colin Baker in Conversation from season 22 is, I feel it's interesting how much like emotion these like documentaries on Blu-rays of, you know, seasons released like nearly 50 years ago can evoke in you. It's interesting. Yeah, it was a really sad documentary, I feel. Yeah, Chris Chapman does this again, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it was so perfect at the end as well to kind of, although it was a very sad sort of ending to the documentary, to at least end on those videos of his wedding, of his first wedding, and sort of the kind of happiest moments, some of the happiest moments of his life, that we kind of get to see that as the final thing of David Whittaker, rather than really, you know, ending on that proper sad note, as much as it is kind of bittersweet because obviously he got divorced and everything. But to even be able to see that, I think, was, you know, a really special moment. And just, it's where, as we say, Chris Chapman just knows the right way to be able to finish a documentary that doesn't just finish on a sad note and that's his life, the end. You know, to throw in that little bit of extra kind of personal element to it, I think is really special and just adds the extra ingredient to the whole documentary. So would you guys say overall it was the best? I know, Ryan, you said it was the best documentary of the box set. Do you agree, Charlie? Would you say?
I'm not sure if it qualifies as, like, it's not a documentary in the same style, but I definitely think the Maureen O'Brien in Conversation was really good. Which I think this is a nice way to segue into the next.
Go for it. Tell me about it.
It's the next documentary we talk about. It's interesting because I expected the William Russell in Conversation to be the highlight of the box set, and while I did love it, I found this a lot more interesting in the sense that it really gave us a lot of detail into, well, her early acting career, as well as her reluctance to be on Doctor Who. Like we hear about all these actors who were like Colin Baker, who were thrilled at the idea of being in Doctor Who, and then they're just on Doctor Who, and they may have issues while working on it, sure, but like we've never really heard it from anyone who didn't want to be on it. And then obviously, we've got all the stuff about her being happy with her stage thing, like, no, I don't want to be on Doctor Who. And then obviously to appease William Hartnell and all of that stuff. I think it's interesting just to see from another perspective, that like, and I get the sense that we didn't really know much about this. Like, I'm not too sure if it was common knowledge, but like I certainly didn't have any idea about all of this. And it's interesting because, and as I was saying, as I've said before in previous collection box set reviews, that it's good that we're not just hearing the same stories that we've heard a million times before in interviews, and we actually delve a lot deeper, and it's more of a sort of the definitive version of, like, you can really get to know these people who worked in Doctor Who, and I think it was really fascinating. Not saying the William Russell one wasn't great. I really loved that one too, but I think Maureen O'Brien in Conversation was possibly on the same level as Looking for David.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation was fascinating. I mean, I knew very little about her beforehand, to be fair. I know she's not been interviewed a huge amount of time. She's doesn't feature on loads of stuff from the sort of original DVD range, and just as we can kind of see in this documentary, she just never really wanted to talk about Doctor Who very much. She kind of didn't love doing it. She was unbelievably self-critical while she was on it, and clearly really struggled with that until, like, the 1980s, 1990s, with kind of being able to accept herself on television or in the theatre or whatever, and actually being happy with what she's putting out there. Because I think she's, a really decent actress and does a really good job in Doctor Who. I don't think there's anything really to criticise there. I know the character doesn't always get given, loads to do, and isn't the most, fleshed out character you've ever seen in Doctor Who, shall we say. But, I think she still does a really good job of that. And so I think it was just fascinating to hear all that. And, like, she was, I think she gave that anecdote where she talked about how just after she'd left Doctor Who, like, someone came up to her and she just pretended that she was a different person because she didn't want to talk about Doctor Who, or didn't want to be seen as being known for Doctor Who at all. She just wanted to kind of escape all that. And so I just thought that was, it was just fascinating to hear from somebody with such a different perspective of being on Doctor Who and working on Doctor Who, not because her experience with Doctor Who was terrible, but just because of the kind of person she was and what she wanted her life to be like, and the way and her outlook and things. And I do think that's what's great about these Matthew Sweet interviews, is the way he kind of is able to find these things out from these people without kind of trying to poke them until they tell them the answers, but like just gradually kind of opening that person up a little bit more. And I mean, from the start she seemed very kind of open and ready to chat about a lot of stuff, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, Ryan, what did you take from the Maureen O'Brien interview?
In a way, I got the sense that this is someone who seemed more passionate about being on stage and writing than she was about TV.
Yeah.
Like, I got the sense that writing and theatre productions was something that she felt more passionate about, that she felt like she belonged to the stage and had a bit more easy experience with stage as opposed to TV. Because I suppose being on TV, you do get noticed more. You do get more attention placed on you. So maybe that aspect maybe was what kind of put her off Doctor. And I think maybe part of the reason why she's in a way still kind of ambivalent about her entire Doctor experience, because of the fact that she didn't really seem to like she belonged on TV to some degree, and probably goes a long way to explain it. So yeah, it was definitely interesting. In a way, I knew that she was ambivalent about Doctor Who, but I think it's given good extent as to why. And I think it's probably again because I don't feel like she felt she belonged to TV, to the world of TV. That she felt more comfortable on stage or later on with writing, because that's she's seemed more passionate about, and where she felt there isn't that much scrutiny or attention.
Yeah, exactly. Because she was immediately like, I love my books. I'm so proud of my books and the things that I've written. Like she really was really, as you say, passionate about it and really liked that work. Whereas if she talked about basically anything that she performed, particularly on television, but even some of the stuff on the theatre, she was always like, "Oh no, I hated it. I hated the performance. I couldn't watch it. Like it was awful." And so it was just so interesting to see her kind of learn about her kind of outlook to it all. I think that I just really knew nothing about, and as you say, Ryan, it really gives us much more of an understanding of why she hasn't been interviewed many times over the years, hasn't been to conventions, hasn't done anything like that, because that's just not for her, and I think that's fine. And that's fine, but it's just great to actually have one interview, one documentary, whatever you want to call it, where we learn about that, where we find that out, and then when I watch her in Doctor Who, you've kind of got a bit more context, and I think that's what so much of this stuff is about, just giving us more context and more understanding of these people, because we're just interested, aren't we? We're just crazy Doctor Who fans that are really interested in these kind of things, and so I think it's great that we really got that. And Charlie, you've obviously already briefly mentioned the William Russelling conversation. Now, I think this is an interesting one. This was obviously filmed kind of 4.5 years ago, back in 2018, because William Russell was, getting a bit older. I think he would have been 93, 94 at the time, because I think he's 98 now, isn't he? And yeah, it's quite a different in conversation, I think, to really any that we've seen before. It's notable, I think, that a lot of it is more focused on Doctor Who compared to, because a lot of the in conversations we've seen, quite a lot of it has been about that person's life, their career outside of Doctor Who, as well as then Doctor Who. So maybe that's kind of developed over time, because obviously this was probably one of the first ones they ever did, and maybe back when they started doing them, that was more how they thought they were going to approach them, and then that kind of changed. But obviously, I guess the key thing really is Russell. I guess his name is Russell, as we learned, that's his real name. Is Russell himself, the fact that he was quite elderly, suffering from dementia to an extent as well, and it's as you say, as great as it is, I don't feel like I've really learned a whole lot from it. It's more just really nice to see him being interviewed and talking so positively about Doctor Who, because it feels like, compared to other ones, Matthew Sweet is a lot more kind of leading the conversation, very much asking lots and lots of questions, kind of putting ideas to him that he can kind of agree with a bit more than trying to really dig deep. But I think that's, as we say, that's because he's in his mid-90s and just hasn't quite got the same, I guess, I don't know what the right way to say it is really, but it's just not quite the same for him compared to say the Maureen O'Brien one. Ryan, did you feel like did you enjoy that? Did you feel like you got a lot from this documentary, this conversation?
In a way, it is sort of what I've heard before, but it was nice that it was kind of done in this sort of as a 50-minute long conversation. It's it was a little bit surreal watching it immediately, almost soon after watching Power of the Doctor, because of course he was in that and was what got the Guinness World Record of longest actor to appear in the show. I believe it was. So yeah, it was definitely surreal from going to that to then seeing him in conversation with Matthew Sweet. And of course, Ian is one of my favourite companions ever, and so it was definitely good to hear about his experience and the fact that he's still very, unlike Maureen O'Brien, who was very ambivalent about it, he's still very proud of Doctor Who. He's still very happy about it, and he is particularly fond of how at the very beginning, when it all started, that level of excitement that they were about to embark on something, that still stuck with him. And so it was great hearing from him and talking about how he got the job from Verity, and so the conversations that they all had, and just about his growing friendship with William Russell and Jacqueline Hill. And you got a sense that there was starting something new and exciting back in 1963, and it was just definitely great just to hear it from him. I mean, it's not what my favourite out of the whole Matthew Sweet conversations, but it was definitely a good entry, and I'm glad that they were able to sort of include it here, leads me to wonder because I have a feeling that for season 1 we are definitely going to have an in conversation with Carol Ann Ford, and so I'm definitely interested to see what she has to say, and also if they do season 3, and even though there is very little of it, that they managed to interview Peter Purvis as well.
I would have thought Peter Purvis for season 3, then Annika Wills for season 4, and then maybe Wendy Padbury for season 5, possibly. Or I guess Fraser Hines for season 5, and then Wendy Padbury for season 6, maybe. I don't know, just a thought there. I mean, I tend to agree with everything you say, Ryan. I think it's really nice to have. I really enjoyed actually some of the insight he had about the RAF and his days in, way back when in the RAF, and some of the sort of getting promoted just to basically keep him quiet and things. I thought that was all just quite funny to hear about, and really interesting. I mean, Charlie, did you think it was quite different to the Maureen O'Brien one, but did you still reasonably enjoy it?
Yeah, it's not a bad, like, in conversation by any means. I think this one sort of reminded me more of that Tom Talks documentary we had, where it wasn't as much an interview as it was just him talking. And I think it's different, but not necessarily bad. It's just not the typical format of an in conversation, especially since William Russell has lived such a long life and has done so much beyond Doctor Who, and they decided to focus so much on Doctor Who. I thought that was not perhaps the best choice, but since it was filmed earlier, one of the first ones, then it does make sense. And maybe after that they thought, hang on, maybe we could talk about the rest of their life as well. Just an idea,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was looking at his filmography, and it's bonkers. He's done so much television in his life. It's ridiculous. There was so much. It's amazing he can remember so much about Doctor Who, and it was 2 years of his life out of about 100 other things he did. So, I think they definitely missed a trick there.
He did a lot of. I think he was practically like a movie star. He did like a lot of movies, like being the lead in so many before he came on to Doctor Who, which kind of explained why he almost sort of compared it to almost like the leading man's almost in those first 2 seasons. Because in a way, he kind of sort of was, because the Doctor was portrayed as more of a mysterious character. Ian was sort of more of our traditional lead hero to some extent, almost.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I think it was a reasonably interesting documentary. It's nice to have, but maybe doesn't give us quite as much insight as some of the previous ones, I think it's fair to say. So a couple of the other features we've got left to cover is, of course, the season 2 overview called Flight Through Eternity, a 45-minute sort of kind of making of the whole series is almost the way I would describe it, a sort of overview of the whole series. I know they did a very similar one for season 3 as well, on the DVD range, and I think it's sort of very much in the same format. I think they even used the same music in this documentary that they used for the season 3 overview as well, just to kind of give it a bit more cohesiveness to it. And I mean, I quite enjoyed it. I feel like it was maybe lacking contributors a little bit. Because there wasn't, I mean, it's difficult because most of the people are no longer with us, and so it's pretty hard to do it. But obviously 2 of the main contributors were Peter Purvis and Carol Ann Ford, who were only in a couple of the stories each. So they didn't really have a perspective of the whole season in the same way. Obviously Richard Martin, I think he was the most entertaining guy, to be honest, on the documentary. And I just love the way that he talks about, they talk about how you could only have 2 cuts in an episode of Doctor Who when you were filming it, and he was like, on a good day I managed 10 because I always went over and everybody hated me. I just thought he's quite a funny guy, really. I don't think he's the best director of Doctor Who history, but he's quite entertaining. I mean, Ryan, Charlie, did you think it was a good overview? Do you think it rushed bits, or what was your general take of this sort of 45-minute fly through eternity of season 2?
Flight would be a good way to describe it, because it just tried to cover so much ground in 45 minutes, and I don't think you can really do that very well, given that there's like 40 episodes and 9 stories. Like, I think it would be great if we had like a 2-hour version of this.
That's exactly
with just a couple more contributors, and I feel it would be a lot better. But like, I start getting interested and like, oh, this is some interesting stuff, and then no, we're on to the next story, and we only have 5 minutes on that, and it just keeps going. And Richard Martin was very good. He was he was the best contributor. I found it interesting how Carol Ann Ford was in it, given that she was only in like 20% of the season and didn't really play a massive role. But I mean, I'm not complaining. It wasn't bad by any means. It was perfectly, it just gave us some information about the making of, and it's just something else for the box set. But yeah, it's definitely not the standout.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair to say. Ryan, did you get any more enjoyment out of it?
Yeah, it was. I would say it was a definitely good glorified DVD extra.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it. Yeah,
it is very much like the season 3 documentary, and very much like the documentary I think they had on the Edge of Destruction DVD, which they talked about the beginning, the making of Doctor. The same music, same format, everything. So, I mean, I'm happy that there is at least a bit of cohesive consistency with these sorts of documentaries, even if it is just basically another one of these DVD extras. But it was a nice overview of the season, and Wretched Martyr was obviously definitely the highlight. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's one of those features that's nice to have. There's a couple of anecdotes I hadn't heard before that are quite fun to have in there, and it's a fine 45 minutes, but it's not anything particularly groundbreaking, I suppose.
Hello everyone, Bill here, and this segment of the podcast probably feels quite different because I unfortunately was not able to record with Elliot, Ryan and Charlie because I was ill at the time, and I feel better now, but that was a bit of a shame, but I'm here now to give you all my thoughts on the Doctor Who Season 2 Collection Blu-ray box set. So, as ever, when it comes to this podcast, KerVAM, we'll discuss the special features. So, the special features we're going to start off with are the In Conversation interviews. This time, Matthew Sweet interviews William Russell and Maureen O'Brien. Now, out of the two, I must admit, I enjoyed both, don't get me wrong, but I thought the Maureen O'Brien one was more interesting and informative, because it was in a similar vein to how the Nicola Bryant one on the previous season 22 box set. The Maureen O'Brien one was very spill the beans, very honest, very open. She was very honest and open about her feelings of working on the program, what she felt like about her character at the time, and how she didn't feel like Vicky was utilised or written well enough or that much, and how she really got very frustrated and disappointed about that. And from an actor's point of view, you can completely understand why, and the way she put it across, completely understandable. And then also the fact that she is still a bit hesitant to be kind of most well known for playing Vicky on Doctor Who, because again, from an actor's point of view, some actors won't always necessarily want to be remembered for just one or two parts that they've done. They may prefer to be remembered for a wider range of parts and characters that they've played over their however long their career has been. That was again very understandable, and I completely understood her reasons why. And then she also talked a bit about her relationship with Bill Hartnell, as well as some of the other co-stars. But particularly the one with Bill Hartnell was very interesting because she kind of said about how he did have some very unpleasant, shall we say, views about some things, which is it's not nice to hear. But she didn't do it in a way that was trying to attack him or anything like that. It was just about kind of saying, this is what Bill Hartnell was like to work with. This is what he was like as a person. And also kind of then very much saying, part of her role, part of her co-star's role, like William Russell's role and Jacqueline Hill's role and Peter Purves' role, became very much to kind of help William Hartnell, to cheer him up to when he'd had a temper tantrum. and to make him laugh, make him smile a bit. So that was very, like I say, very interesting, very informative. The Win Russell one was still very good, though. I think they had to record it all the way back in 2018 because, unfortunately, it was recently revealed that he's got, I think, either Alzheimer's or dementia, which is very sad to hear about. And but he in that interview he still very much fondly looked back on his time on the show, and it was really, really nice interviews. So both really, really good interviews, but I do feel like, personally speaking, the Maureen O'Brien one was perhaps the more kind of like with a similar kind of vein, as I said to earlier, than the Nicola Bryant one on season 22. It had that kind of like, wow, okay, it spilled the beans, as it were. Then you had the Behind the Sofas. Obviously, unfortunately, I myself have not been able to actually watch them yet because I was too busy trying to watch all the other special features, all the other main ones anyway. And I've not actually managed to sit down and watch any of them yet. I've heard rumours that, the vague mentions to them, to some of the people who did these Behind the Sofas, watching other episodes for potentially other stories or other seasons right before watching these ones, which is interesting. It's interesting that they've decided to record some of their reactions on one or two big things. But yeah, it's still really, really good little, again, mini documentary. And then we had the, I think the next one was, the Looking for David. I think it's called, a sort of documentary presented by Toby Haddock, all about the life of David Whittaker. And that was, again, really, really interesting. I really enjoyed watching that and finding out more about, this, David Whittaker being the show's first script editor, or story editor as it was then, and how we didn't actually know that much about him, and just how little we actually knew about him and about his life, about his time on the show, etc. And just hearing some of the stuff that happened to him. His falling outs with Terry Nation about the Daleks, and how he eventually got blacklisted, essentially, by the BBC and the media as a whole, for a speech he'd given at a Writers' Guild thing in the late 60s. That was like really, clearly his life was, he had his fair share of struggles. It was really informative, and Toby did a really great job of interviewing all the people and just kind of giving us a taste of what David Whittaker's life was actually like. And then lastly, we have the reconstructions for the missing 2 episodes of The Crusade. Obviously, it is a shame that we don't, as of yet, that is a bit of a shame, I should say, that the animations have, as of right now, been put on hold a bit. But to be honest, I feel like we should be grateful that we're getting these reconstructions, because they are essentially the next best thing, and they're still done really well by the team that worked on them, and it's still really good. I didn't realise that The Crusade as a story itself was basically just Barbara getting captured, and then the others, Dr. Ian and Vicky, spending 4 episodes rescuing her and getting her back, and then flying off in the TARDIS, ready for the next story, the Space Museum. That's a bit funny, but I doubt very much that was the first or last Doctor Who story that was a bit like that. The reconstructions themselves, really good, very high quality, and as far as I'm concerned, as long as they're better than the really low quality, awful ones we had for the Underwater Menace DVD release back in the day, then yeah, it's a win-win. It's a win in my book, I should say. So yeah, that is, I believe, pretty much everything that I can think of anyway. Obviously, the others may talk about some of the other special features, but I believe that's all the main ones that I want to talk about anyway. So I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I shall see you all in 2023. And don't worry, because next time I'm sure we'll definitely all be back to able to record again together.
And so the final kind of documentary is a bit shorter. It's only just over 20 minutes, but the final documentary, which looks like the first in a series of, I guess, 3, because this is about the 60s, is the merchandise of Doctor Who, or Doctor Who and the Collectors, I think they called it. And it's basically just an overview of 1960s Doctor Who merchandise and meeting a few super fans who have ridiculously large collections of Doctor Who merchandise. That's just absolutely bonkers. Like there's one, I can't remember which one it was. One of them had like a spreadsheet with 13,000 items in it or something stupid like that, and I was just like, it's absolute madness. I mean, obviously we're Doctor Who fans, we've got a spreadsheet. I was like, yeah, absolutely, you're a Doctor Who fan if you've got a spreadsheet. But I just thought that was quite funny. It's of course fronted by Emily Cook of Doctor Who magazine and the Doctor Who watch-alongs during lockdown. I think it's the first kind of documentary that she's fronted in the collection range. I know she contributed to the little extra making or sort of features on the Dalek movie releases. She was in both of those doing a little bit of I'm watching it for the first time, here's what I think of each of the Dalek movies. But this is her first time kind of leading a documentary. I know only you've seen it, Ryan. So what did you think of the documentary, of Emily Cook's presentation, of the documentary itself? Did you find it a fun in 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, it was definitely fun in 20 minutes. Definitely gave me insight into the merchandise back then that I did not experience before. Like, just some of the stuff like the Dalek punching bag, I believe there was that, and also a Dalek outfit and these badges. I mean, of course, Dalek Mania was a huge thing, but they went as far as making badges for the Zarbi and the Menoptera.
I know. And then they didn't sell any, and now they're worth like thousands of pounds.
Exactly. So it maybe just goes to show that maybe the Web Planet did resonate for some people. So goes to show how much it did have an impact. So, and yeah, it's just amazing how the fact that they talk about this deal that they made in, I believe it was from I think it's this, talk about this Australian entrepreneur that actually made the agreement to the BBC to produce the merchandise. And of course, this what actually led to some of the first ones, which I believe was in 1964, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
When merchandise started, and then which led to Louis Marks making those well-known Dalek toys, which I believe they made more than 24,000 of them before making then 500,000 a few months later before stopping production in 1965. And that's basically been the most iconic thing, because whenever I see talk about Doctor Who merchandise, the Louis Marks Daleks have always been sort of the key thing everyone talked about. So it was definitely interesting to see how they talk about the merchandise and what little there was back then compared to how much stuff there is nowadays. So, and I think Emily Cook did a very good job of going through that, even though it was only 20 minutes long. So it's going to be, and I'm wondering, I feel like maybe it was 20 minutes because there wasn't really that much to talk about, because the fact it was little to merchandise in the 60s.
Well, yeah, exactly. As they were saying, kind of, you had the 2-3 years of Dalek Mania and a million Dalek merchandise things through the sort of 64, 65, 66. And then Charlton came along and there was no merchandise for the rest of the 60s, and that was it. And it's just, so it sort of almost feels like where we're at right now to an extent, really. Whereas you had the David Tennant era of every merchandise you could think of, and even through the Matt Smith era, but then through sort of Capaldi and Whittaker, there's just been hardly any merchandise at all.
Exactly. And I feel like with John Pertwee and Tom Baker being more popular doctors, I feel like there was more merchandise being produced. I know, but Doctor Who magazine started back in the 70s, so it's going to be interesting to see how she's going to cover the 70s and particularly the 80s, because I think the 80s is when they were really starting to get the merchandise in. And if they ever do a Wilderness Years Blu-ray set, I guarantee that she might touch upon the 90s and early 2000s.
It seems an obvious feature to do, certainly, yeah.
So, I mean, there's definitely movement potential. I think it's a good starting off point. It's a nice experiment, and which I thought paid off well. And I'm hoping that they continue with this as we hopefully get more 70s and 80s Blu-ray set.
Well, I certainly, given the way she kind of almost did a to be continued at the end of it, didn't she? Sort of, and what will the 70s be like for Doctor Who merchandise kind of thing. So I'm pretty sure and they called it part 1, so I'm sure they're planning to do it. I'll be intrigued to see which season they choose to drop it onto. I was trying to think of the unreleased 70s seasons, which one would you put it on? I don't really know what the kind of iconic merchandise of the 70s is that you'd kind of associate it with, really. Maybe Doctor Who magazine? So that'd be what, season 13, I think, would it? 76, was it?
13 or 16, I think it's when they'll do it. I think it's going to be for one of those 2 seasons.
I would have certainly have thought so. So yeah, that was a fun 25-minute documentary, and just seeing these crazy collections of Doctor Who merchandise was really, really entertaining as well. Obviously something that I'm never ever going to have, as much as I have my collection of Blu-rays, and that's enough for me. I'm not going to get all the rest of the stuff. And then the final new feature, main new feature, was of course the behind the sofa features that we get on every single box set. Albeit for the first time, not on every single story in this box set, which is quite notable. We didn't have one for the Space Museum, the Crusade, and Planet of Giants. I don't know why I did that in reverse, but those 3 stories did not have behind the sofa, so we only had 6 of them. It's probably because 9 stories is too much to try and do in one day, and it would cost them way too much money to get them all in for a second day, so they just had to cut them down. And if they try to squeeze it into a day, that would be a blooming long day watching Doctor Who. Even for us fans, I think we'd struggle watching 10 hours of William Hartnell Doctor Who in a day. It'd be quite a lot. So I know, Charlie, you've seen a couple of these. I've seen a couple of these. The pairings, of course, were Bonnie Langford and Sophie Aldred, 7th Doctor companions. Together we had the classic Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, but we also threw in Wendy Padbury into that as well. And then we had Maureen O'Brien, Peter Purvis, and Carol Ann Ford was the other sofa. So quite a really great variety, I thought, there across different eras of the show, people who were in it and people who weren't. I don't know, Charlie, what did you think based on the ones you've seen? What's your sort of I know they're kind of fairly samey now to an extent, I feel like, but was there anything notable about these ones?
There wasn't anything incredible that I thought set it apart from the other behind the sofas. Like they're always fun to watch. But yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing that there's nothing overly different about them. It's just a fun thing to watch, like 25-30 minutes after watching a story. I watched both of the Dalek story, behind the sofas, for Dalek Invasion of Earth, and The Chase. They were all likable. Obviously we have the iconic duo of Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding, who we've had on, I want to say 7 of these now.
I think it's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be almost all of them, I think.
Yeah, I know it's not all of them. No. I mean, what are we on now? Number 11, 12?
I think this is the overall 12th release, I think.
Yeah, I think this is the 12th one, I think.
Yeah. So, maybe even more, maybe even 10, 11 of them, I don't know. Yeah. They're always there. They're great. I did find it interesting how there's no production team for this. Like in the past, I know I said for season 22, then we had sort of, I remember I commented on the fact that they never mix the actors and like the production team. They're always separated. But here there was no production team, which I think, I don't know, maybe they just didn't want any. Maybe they couldn't find any. I'm not too sure.
Unfortunately, there's again not that many left, is there? Because it's so long ago. No, so maybe that's the challenge of trying to find some of them. But that is notable that it was purely actors on this occasion. And I know sometimes they try getting in, like new series writers and things like that, which I always think works quite well. And so I thought it was, maybe that's a look for a future black and white season where there's no one around. You could get some people from the new series to come and do that. But I thought it was also interesting that Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton, they feel quite different on these releases when they don't have Peter Davison there. Because I feel like Peter Davison basically just comes on to say that everything is terrible. Even his own Doctor Who, he's very much just like, this is a bit rubbish. I don't really know what's going on, isn't it? To basically any Doctor Who. But I feel like they kind of go along with it when he's there. But actually, when he's not, and you've kind of got Wendy Padbury, who's kind of just there trying to understand what's going on and try and be, find the positives in it. And so I feel like they're naturally a bit more positive when they're around somebody who isn't Peter Davison. I don't know. That was just what struck me about it. But yeah, guys, overall, do you think this Ryan, do you think this is a strong collection release? I mean, it's maybe not as filled out each of the discs as some of the previous ones, but did you enjoy it overall?
I think it's a good, solid set. I mean, there are few sets I would say are maybe you could say are better, like maybe season 8 or one of the Tom Baker seasons, like season 17 almost. I mean, that did have some good features, but I do think this is a good solid season. I think this is up there with the best ones. I mean, it does have me curious about how they're going to handle the rest of the 60s, considering there isn't that much of it, particularly in season 3. It's going to be very interesting how they're going to try and tackle that one. But I mean, and I'm glad that they've actually tried to do something for the 60s now, pushing it way too further back. So yeah, it does leave me optimistic, but we shall soon see about whether or not they decide to go even further with 60s.
Yeah, it's certainly great to see that they've finally done a 60s season after 5 years into this collection range. We're finally there, which is really, really great. And as you say, season 3 is going to be difficult, but hopefully in another 4 or 5 years' time, it might be a bit more doable. But we'll have to wait and see on that. And Charlie, overall, have you enjoyed this box set as a whole from what you've seen of it?
Yeah, it's a good collection box set, a nice addition to the collection of collection box sets. It wasn't the best. I think obviously it's difficult to do when sadly not many of your production team and actors are around. But I do still wish we had 3 box sets this year. I do think it's a shame we've only had a couple, but hopefully next year we'll have season 1. Ideally, in a perfect world, we'd have season 1 in November next year. We've got to. I think my dream roster of collection box sets next year would be 7, 13, and 1, because they're 2 of the best, most beloved seasons, and then also the first ever season. It would just make sense, but I don't think that's going to happen because of how difficult season 7 would be. I'm just waffling about season 7 now. I tend to do that quite a lot. But yeah, it's it's a good release. I liked it. It was more than worth the money. I think if these collection box sets cost 150 quid, I'd still buy them because they're just they're really great.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's as you say, maybe not one of the absolute greatest ones, but it's still great to have all the episodes in better restoration and better sound, to have all these additional features, and just to have it as part of that overall collection, I think is absolutely fantastic. And so that is just about all we have time for in this edition of KerVAM. We'll be back in the new year, of course, so have a great Christmas and a happy new year. We're going to be back with lots more podcasts. Even if there isn't that much content to talk about, we're still going to find topics, don't you worry. Do you remember to check us out on Twitter at KerVAMPod, and you can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But for now, that's it from this edition of KerVAM. All it leaves for me to say is goodbye.